The road trip comes to an end in Buffalo, but will it be the end for Bruce Boudreau? Pre-game show next. Rink Wide Vancouver. Pre-game, post-game, every game presented by Bodog. From sports odds to free casino games, make a play at bodog.net. Wadden and JPat here with you with another edition of the pre-game show as round 2 between the Canucks and the Sabres. JPat, round 1 didn't go so well. End of a road trip for Vancouver, and this is a road trip that the players probably want to end fairly soon.
Well, they're going to get their wish. It will come to an end after this game in Buffalo. You mentioned the second meeting of the season. Of course, the first one was the Canucks home opener. That did not go well. It ended with jerseys on the ice, the team being booed off the ice at Rogers Arena after a 5-1 loss that actually was close. It was a 2-1 game into the third, and then the Sabres skated away from the Vancouver Canucks. Canucks have spun their wheels since then. Sabres have kind of come back down to earth. Remember, they were one of the hot teams. They came through Western Canada and they swept the Alberta teams, and then they beat up on the Vancouver Canucks as well. Hasn't gone so well for them. We'll talk more about them, but this is a Canucks pregame show. So let's get right into it. Bouncing back, or at least they're going to try to bounce back after the loss in Buffalo or in Boston over the weekend and Toronto before that. Trying to bookend this road trip with victories. The trip started well enough with the win in Ottawa, but since then losses in Montreal, Toronto, and Boston. And all of a sudden, offense, which hasn't been an issue for the Vancouver Canucks all season long. Certainly 5-on-5 offense has gone quiet. They had just one even-strength goal over the weekend, and from their forward group, just 2 even-strength goals in the last 3 games. So the power play continues to be potent, but you can't live on the power play alone. The game is still played for the most part at even strength, and the Vancouver Canucks need to find a way to produce more at 5-on-5.
End of the road for the road trip. Perhaps the end of the road for Bruce Boudreau?
Yeah, you do wonder if this is Bruce's last stand, and I'm sure he'll get in there and give it all he can. He's still the coach for the time being, but you wonder with these mounting losses if change is going to come. It just sort of feels like change is inevitable with the Vancouver Canucks, but maybe they can change their fortunes and get a victory over Buffalo here and come home with something to build on. We'll see. But yeah, you do wonder if Bruce Boudreau is on borrowed time. And how's that going to affect the lineup that he ices? Does he get Andrei Kuzmenko back in after making him a scratch in Boston the other night? One thing we know about Bruce Boudreau is generally when he has sent a message to a player, he has put him back in the lineup the next game and given him an opportunity to try to get it right for Kuzmenko. Obviously, this is a guy that scored a bunch of goals for the Vancouver Canucks, but his play has tailed off over the last bunch of games to the point that he played less than 10 minutes in Toronto on Saturday and then was sat down for that game in Boston on Sunday. We also learned earlier today that Jack Studnicka, who played the game in Boston the other night, is now on IR, believed to be a lower body injury, so the Canucks make a roster move there. Will Lockwood's been recalled. He was up earlier in the season, didn't get into the lineup. I wonder if they plug him in and give him a little bit of spark and some fresh legs and some energy to this lineup. But if Lockwood plays, it means that somebody else would likely then have to sit down if Kuzmenko is reinserted into the lineup. So we'll have to wait until warm-up to get a better sense of what kind of team the Canucks are going to ice and what they're going to do on the back end. Bottom line is, whether it's Will Lockwood, whether it's Andrei Kuzmenko getting reinserted into the lineup, they just need more. They need more from the top of the lineup. They need more from the bottom of the lineup as well.
Maybe a message being sent to Thatcher Demko because it looks like the understudy is going to get another start and goal.
Yeah, or is he the understudy? I'm not going to get into the goaltending controversy, but it certainly feels like a goaltending job share now. And even further than that, if you go back to the last 9 Canuck games, including this one tonight, Spencer Martin has started 5 of them. So in those 9 games, Spencer Martin's gotten the tab 5 times, and Thatcher Demko just 4. So it certainly feels like Bruce Boudreau has confidence in Spencer Martin. He did his part to keep the Canucks in it the other night in Toronto. Ultimately, the Leafs were able to wear the Canucks down, but Spencer Martin has been one of the better stories on this Vancouver team. There aren't enough good news stories in the early going this season, but yeah, no issues with this. He's playing well. Thatcher Demko continues to struggle to find his game. And so how about that? At the outset of the season, if somebody had told you that 16 games or 17 games into the season, the Canucks would go on another 5-game road trip and Spencer Martin, the backup, would start 3 of the 5 and would have the only victory. Not sure I would have believed it then, but I do believe it now. And we'll see what Spencer Martin can do to backstop the Vancouver Canucks against the Sabres tonight in Buffalo.
All right, they came into the league together back in 1970, and they're both still in search of the NHL's Holy Grail. That's our question of the day today. Who wins the Stanley Cup first between the Buffalo Sabres and the Vancouver Canucks?
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to be linked by expansion, but they've also been linked by just remarkably dark decades here over the past 10 years. So on one level, it's kind of, it makes me laugh to think that we're even talking about Stanley Cups with these two franchises right here, right now. But the Sabres do look like they have turned some sort of corner. You're drafted in the top 10 basically for a decade. You'd like to think that at some point, all of that talent will materialize into something. And again, they're not contenders right here, right now, but they show some signs of promise. They can score some goals. They've got a couple of number 1 overall picks on the back end. In fact, they're going to play together tonight in Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin, and those are certainly cornerstones. Questions about the Sabres goaltending, but right here, right now, the Buffalo Sabres look a little closer to a Stanley Cup than the Vancouver Canucks, but let's not fool ourselves. They both have a lot of ground to cover.
And the Sabres do cover ground. They got some speed up front, JPat. Canucks going to be able to handle that?
Yeah, and I think the Canucks saw that firsthand in that home opener as Buffalo pulled away from the Vancouver Canucks. And look what happened the other night in Boston. The Canucks took 6 minor penalties. Now, they weren't all stick-related, a couple of pucks over the glass and Quinn Hughes playing with his mini stick. But the point is, the Buffalo Sabres have a top 10 power play. We know that the Canucks penalty kill remains dead last in the National Hockey League. So with that speed, the Canucks are going to have to find a way to keep their feet moving. You don't want to put sticks and gloves on players and tempt the referees to make calls, because if Buffalo gets a chance to work on the power play, we know that that's sort of spelled doomsday for the Vancouver Canucks when other teams go to work with the man advantage. So let's see what the Sabres do. They're reeling. They're not playing particularly well. In fact, after that swing through the West Coast where they were taking the league by storm, all of a sudden Buffalo comes into this game tonight having lost 5 in a row. But if you scratch a little bit deeper, I think you can understand why they've lost some of these hockey games. You look at their schedule. Of those 5 straight losses, they lost to Boston the other night. Everybody's losing to Boston. They lost to Vegas. Well, everybody's losing to Vegas as well. They lost in Carolina and Tampa, 2 teams that have designs on deep playoff runs, if not getting their hands on the Stanley Cup. So, bit of a murderer's row. The one loss that I'm sure Buffalo's kicking itself over was a home ice loss to the lowly Arizona Coyotes.
Oh, sad trombone there. You can forgive them for the other losses, though. Tage Thompson, red hot this year. 11 goals already this season, but Alex Tuch has gone a little bit cold.
Yeah, and Alex Tuch was a big part of that early season success. He had a hat-trick in Edmonton. He came through Vancouver. He scored the game winner there on a bad turnover and a bad sequence by the Vancouver Canucks. And at one point had 6 goals in his first 5 games. But guess what? It's hard to stay at that kind of pace, and Alex Tuch has just 1 goal in his last 10. He's a dynamic player. He's part of this speed that the Sabres are trying to put together, but he's gone a little cold right now. Maybe he heats things up, seeing the Vancouver Canucks on the other side. Certainly has seen the Canucks enough over his time in the NHL. Started in Minnesota, went to Vegas. Now he's a part of the Buffalo Sabres, but great start to the season. Right now, a little bit of a lull, but they still they have high expectations for Alex Tuch, and you're right about Tage Thompson. Got the big contract extension in the offseason and is starting to show that this guy is money for the Sabres. 11 goals. There aren't a lot of guys in double digits. The Canucks have 1 in Bo Horvat, and Tage Thompson not far behind with those 11 goals that he scored in his team's first 15 games this season.
Yeah, just 6 goals for Elias Pettersson this year. So that brings me to a Bodog best bet. I've got anytime goal scorer Elias Pettersson at plus 155. JPat, he hasn't gone more than 3 games without a goal this year. He's 3 in a row now. I'm going to see if he can get back on track with a goal tonight.
Yeah, and he's one of these guys, when we talk about even strength goals, that you go back to the Ottawa game, he scored into an empty net. That's his last goal. Now, the effort level is there. He had a couple of shorthanded opportunities in Boston the other night, but at 5-on-5, Pettersson, like those around him, and it sort of goes hand in hand, just gone way too quiet for the Vancouver Canucks. But he still represents the idea of offense, certainly beyond Bo Horvat and JT Miller, who are scoring with regularity, and Miller scored in both of those games over the weekend, so he's kind of holding the hot hand right now. Elias Pettersson, not so much, but it kind of feels like he's due. Wasn't able to celebrate that 24th birthday of his on Saturday in Toronto, nor in Boston on Sunday, but maybe to wrap up the road trip, EP40 digs down and comes through for the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, he might have celebrated on Friday night. He did have the night off in Toronto there, perhaps.
That's true.
Could have been a reason why he didn't score. All right. Who you got tonight that's going to do something from the Canucks?
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer would be everybody, top to bottom. It kind of feels like it's going to take a full team effort if the Vancouver Canucks are going to finish out this road trip with a victory. But I've identified one guy that I just think's gone way too quiet. Thought he got off to a decent start this season, and that's Connor Garland. 8 games now without a goal. And he's gone 3 games without a point, so on this losing streak for the Vancouver Canucks, Garland hasn't been able to contribute. Had a couple of assists in Ottawa at the start of the road trip. They need more from him in that regard. But more than the 8 games without a goal, his last goal was into an empty net in Seattle. It's been 10 full games since he beat a National Hockey League goaltender. And you know who that goalie was? It was Craig Anderson, the guy that he's going to see at the other end tonight. Garland scored the Canucks' lone goal in the home opener back on October 22nd. It was a power play marker then. He was set up in front by Tanner Pearson and Ilya Mikheyev and pulled the trigger. So maybe seeing Craig Anderson on the other side tonight will channel some good vibes for Connor Garland. But paying him $5 million, supposed to be a point producer. He's got 8 points in 15 games, so basically half a point per game. That's not an outrageous pace for him. But we saw it last year. He went that stretch of 20 games without a goal. You don't want Connor Garland falling into these long stretches without putting a puck in the net. So he's an energy guy. This team needs some energy. I'm looking at Connor Garland, but I'm looking at everybody really to do something to help the Canucks finish up the road trip with a win in Buffalo tonight.
You don't want to miss the post-game show, and we'll have that for you as quick as we can after the final horn as the Canucks look to right the ship as they head home to Vancouver, get a win, hopefully, in Buffalo over the Sabres. This has been another edition of the Rink Wide Vancouver podcast presented by Bodog. For Jeff Patterson, I'm Andrew Wadden. Remember, Rink Wide is the show that always scores.